We are here today at European Development Days 2019, and for European Centre for Electoral Support, it is the 5th consecutive year we are coming to showcase what we could have been doing in several countries with the funding of the European Union, especially because the European Centre for Electoral Support has established itself in 2010 specifically in order to provide the European Union and European Union member states as an alternative delivery mechanism to implement electoral assistance projects to follow EU values and the EU procedures. This time around, this year, we have been the possibility to invite our partner from different countries where we are implementing projects, namely Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa, and also to juxtapose those three giant countries in Africa with the specific cases of Jordan and Afghanistan, where it comes to preventing, managing electoral conflict and violence in so difficult scenarios and contexts. So therefore, the European Union, what is trying to do every year in the European Development Days is to bring in Brussels and centralize what is the experience, what is the knowledge gathered all together from different sides, so implementing partners, donors and beneficiaries together, sharing the lesson learned every year and to try to see how this lesson learned can be applicable for the years to come. When it comes to European Centre for Electoral Support, certainly the lesson that we have learned throughout 2010 are going to be extremely useful for us in order to implement projects that we are implementing in the future, especially the starting one in Ethiopia to support the next electoral process there. This year we were asked to implement a high-level panel to discuss with all the different partner beneficiaries and donors, specifically the European Union, on what kind of activity we have done to promote inclusiveness and participation of disadvantaged groups, especially women, youth and disabled persons. So therefore we had the possibility to explain and illustrate through the different representatives of electoral management bodies that could come here with us, the specific activities on civic and voter education and the inclusivity of women and youth. Just to make some examples, we had the possibility to showcase what we did, for instance, in Nigeria, where in order to motivate youth to participate to the election and cast their vote and to participate, therefore, to political life in Nigeria, so we had to organize youth campus, so large gathering of youth in all the main universities in Nigeria, where we had the pleasure and the gift to have the most famous singers and artists in Nigeria to come and together with us, the European Union and the Electoral Commission, motivate, let's say, the youth to come to vote for the Nigerian electoral process. And this is something that we are replicating to all the different countries where we are working. The European Centre for Electoral Support was actually launched at the European Development Days in 2010 by our back then president, Abbot Apollinaire Malumalu. This is also a recognition of what we've been doing in order to fulfill a need that was felt between EU services, EU delegations and especially beneficiaries of these electoral assistance projects. It was felt that it was the time to establish a not-for-profit foundation from European and African actors in order to take on board what are the views of the beneficiaries and the EU when it comes to implementing projects. So therefore, a number of electoral and democracy practitioners in 2010 has joined forces and therefore established the European Centre for Electoral Support as this alternative mechanism to implement electoral system projects. The journey actually is much longer than this, because I had the possibility 22 years ago to go in my first missions in Bosnia and Herzegovina right after the Daytona Agreement. And as a younger, 27 years old man, I arrived there and I found the United Nations, I found the Organization of Security and Cooperation of Europe, I found IFES, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, which is, let's say, the most important implementing arm of USAID on electoral assistance. And I started to ask around, as unexperienced I was, where is the European Center for Electoral Support. And I was told, no, this is not existing. You know, at the European Union level, there was not such an initiative that's been developed yet. This question stayed in my own mind, and I was dreaming back then. I said, why one day I would not participate to contribute to establish this center that actually is not existing at European level. So the year passed by, and I had the possibility to be coordinator of the EU election observation mission. At a certain point, I was invited to work at the European Union delegation in Mozambique, all the time following implementation of projects that were developed and implemented through the United Nations Development Programme. And at a certain point, I was called in Brussels to draft the EU methodological guide on electoral assistance. It was 2004. This guide was actually drafted in 2006, and at present is still the existing official only guide of the European Union on electoral assistance. And since there was no a not-for-profit foundation to implement this kind of project, back then we had agreed with the EU services to establish a partnership between European Commission and UNDP in order to allow European Union to have a little bit more political visibility and a little bit more say in the implementation of the project. So what we did is to create a joint task force between European Commission and the UNDP to implement the electoral assistance project, for which I was the coordinator, and we have also de facto and de jure established this partnership where we sign operational guidelines between the two organizations, and we were implementing twice a year joint training on effective electoral assistance, combining electoral management bodies, EU services and UNDP services worldwide in order to facilitate this partnership. The year went on, and again, this need and this request of the EU delegation and beneficiaries to have a specific European not-for-profit foundation was still present. So therefore we took the risk, we took the courage and the passion, all of us, to leave the job that we were doing respectively. I was the coordinator of the Joint Task Force at the United Nations, and therefore we have established this European Center for Electoral Support, where since 2010 until today we were able to implement projects in 40 countries, and nowadays I think we are together with UNDP and International IDEA among the three most important implementers for EU funds on electoral assistance worldwide. The activities are evolved enormously since that time till nowadays, because first of all we don't have to forget that electoral assistance is not an activity compared to the other development cooperation world, which has been implemented since decades. We are talking about a field of activity that started practically 92-93 with the electoral assistance of the United Nations in Namibia, in Mozambique, in South Africa, and then it went on for Cambodia, for Bosnia, and so on and so forth. So it's a new kind of job, and therefore a new kind of capacity development needs we had to develop. And little by little, all these years, you have specific publications, specific training, masters to which we are partnering on electoral policy administration that has been developed, because nowadays beneficiaries are much more aware of what are their needs and how they would like to implement electoral assistance, how they would like to receive electoral assistance, which obviously entail that elections is no blueprint anywhere. Every process is different, and you need the customization and harmonization of all your project and approaches to each and single different countries. So nowadays we are implementing more peer review. We are hiring more and more people coming from the regions or from the specific countries where we are working, and therefore I try to bring on board the local perspective when we implement this kind of activity. Certainly we were at the forefront to copyright some of the specific activity we are implementing. The first and most important is this curriculum on leadership and conflict management skills for electoral stakeholders, where we mix all the different stakeholders of an electoral process, electoral management bodies, civil society organization, domestic observation people, justice sector institutions dealing with electoral dispute resolution, security forces, journalists, media. All these, let's say, stakeholders are mixed together in one room, and we reflect on the role and responsibility of each of the group, on the leadership they have, and the responsibility they have to prevent and mitigate and manage electoral conflicts and violence. This is an activity that we've been implemented everywhere. It has been translated in 6 languages, and we are continuing to be asked to implement it. The other activities that we have copyrighted is our own specific approach called the European Response on Electoral Cycle Support, which is the ECES response to support the different steps of an electoral cycle, from legal reform up to transmission of results and post-election review. Not forgetting that lately we have also copyrighted our own approach on electoral political economy analysis, which inform each and single of our projects at the beginning, so we know exactly what is the electoral political scenario we have to deal with in order to implement our own specific projects and activities. I do actually think that there is a difference since the moment we have started the electoral assistance activity, let's say, till nowadays, and in several countries we have seen certainly an improvement on the perception of the ordinary voting, as you were saying, on their weight of their vote casted, and then the fact that you have more participation in general, not in all the country, but in general, that is witness where we are working, is also a direct link to these electoral system projects, where together with the electoral management bodies and civil society organizations of the countries, you have a collective effort to underline the importance of democratic governance, to underline the importance of democracy, of participation in political life, especially of disadvantaged groups that so far, for some reason or another, in different countries, had not the possibility to participate or had not been enfranchised enough to participate. We are talking about women, youth, and disabled people. So therefore, certainly, there is an improvement. This is also what drives us every day. This is what drives us to leave our job previously and to take the risk and to put our own heart in this endeavor of establishing from scratch a European not-for-profit foundation to support electoral processes worldwide, especially having in mind the beneficiary point of view that we were able to gather because of the important contribution of our first president, Abbot Apollinaire Malou Malou, which was as well the chairperson of the Electoral Commission in the Southern African countries and in Central African countries. So it was a renowned figures on the electoral world in Africa, so we had the possibility to gather through him and through his collaborators the point of view of beneficiaries when it comes to receive electoral assistance on a certain matter. Unfortunately, our president left us. He died a few years back with the brain cancer, but certainly we are thinking and hope to bring the same message he was actually telling us to bring, where in future elections in Africa would be normal activities and not a question of life and death and bringing on and on conflicts that we've been seeing in many other countries. So we are quite optimistic. The road and the path to improving what we are doing also in our own Western democracy is very long, and then obviously there is no vertical, or let's say steady development. You can have important setback, and therefore you need to engage all the time in our own Western democracy, but as well in other countries where we work, without thinking that we have a superior model or superior elections to export. The only things we can export is comparative experience, comparative knowledge, and exchange in order for the beneficiaries of these activities own and understand that is in the benefit of development cooperation to have free and fair, sustainable and cost-effective elections. Abbot Apollinaire Malumalu was obviously a man of church, and therefore from Catholic Church, that he was at a certain point after the Great Lakes War, was elected as the head president of the Electoral Commission in Democratic Republic of Congo that had to carry out constitutional referendum and legislative and presidential elections. He was a very practical man, though he has been studying electoral and political science in several countries in Europe, but he was very practical in the searching of a consensus where at the end of the day we know politics and elections is the art of the possible. So therefore you need to put together all the different contestants and competitors and make sure that everybody perceive and think that what you are doing, it is actually free and fair for them to compete in the best possible manner and to have the results that are acceptable by everybody. So therefore the vision of the European Centre for Electoral Support comes from these African visions, the visions of the beneficiaries, from a vision of a European expert, including myself and other colleagues, that wanted to put together and join forces in order to blend the vision of the beneficiary when it comes to receive electoral assistance that is not patronizing, and therefore also ourselves bringing the comparative experience of having implemented election observation, the electoral assistance projects in different countries of the world, in different regions of the world. Therefore, this has actually made possible the creation of what is our own strategy and the methodology, the European response on electoral cycle support. So the vision and the legacy Abbot Apollinaire Malumalu left us is the vision of constant dialogue in order to find the way where everybody will feel at ease and comfortable in electoral processes, where at the end of the day we are talking about extremely difficult and costly processes that are second only to war. So if you think well, organizing an election for a state, especially a state in transitional democracy or post-conflict, is actually second for cost, for operations, for logistics, for human resources, only to war. And this is something that we have been discussing all the time with him, whereby it is an important issues to remember all the time when we are organizing this kind of activities of electoral assistance or organizing elections, which are extremely costly. But if you think that you fail election, if you fail to convince as an electoral administrator and electoral assistance providers that the elections have been held in a fair manner where everybody had the possibility to compete properly, then you will go back to conflict, which is zillion times more costly in human resource cost, logistics and operations of an election. So I think the legacy Abbot Malumalu left us is a practical dialogue in policy, in politics and in elections, where everybody needs to feel comfortable and respected in the way they will compete on elections. It is certainly so, and this is due to the professionalization of electoral administrators, and also to capacity development, and to peer review. Because more and more now, also thanks for the bad and the good of the social networks, of the internet, and now knowledge on electoral administrations, information about rigging worldwide or fraud worldwide, it is readily available, which was not the case 20 years ago, like any other sort of field in our own work. So nowadays you search a little bit on internet what was the elections here and there, and you will find tons of material that sometimes it can be related to fake news, sometimes it's actually genuine material, but you do have an effort of the different international organizations, not-for-profit organizations like us, that has made in order to codify electoral knowledge, which was not the case before. Before the Berlin Wall collapse, there was not this comparative knowledge and literature that could be looked at in order to learn from one country to another. You have several institutions that have contributed enormously to the collective increase of electoral knowledge worldwide, and nowadays this knowledge it is more and more available also through face-to-face training, hybrid training, online training, master, and so on and so forth, which was not the case 20 years ago. So therefore now not only is more and more difficult to implement fraud, also because you have the introduction of new information technology like in any other field of our daily life, and therefore if properly managed, the introduction of new technology in the limitation of boundaries with satellite technology like on voter registration, on voter identification, transmission of results, if properly managed, this technology is actually on the long run cost effective and bringing more transparency. However, there is a rule, the introduction of this technology, it is strictly related to the trust that electoral management bodies enjoy from the different stakeholders. If there is no trust in the electoral management bodies and there is an introduction of a further technology, this will bring exactly the contrary of what this technology actually is promising. So we need to have a very skeptical approach in introducing technology, especially very close to election day, because this kind of technology that can be extremely positive for the implementation of transparency or increase of transparency in the electoral process need to be properly planned. The different electoral stakeholders need to absorb the potential positiveness of this technology being implemented, and you need to make a lot of training and a lot of civic voter education for the different electoral stakeholders, perceive, and I underline perceive, that this technological improvement is actually bringing more transparency and not more intricacy in order to, let's say, dilute the understanding of the specific step of an electoral process with the very complex electoral technology. The question of introducing technology, e-voting, how to deal with social networks which are much more involved and actually incredibly involved in Western or worldwide elections nowadays, and they have a huge impact on the building up of the consensus, is something that constitute our daily activities. So every time we are working in the countries, most of the times when we are talking about leadership, conflict management, we are talking about electoral administration, best practices, we need to relate to the introduction and use of this new information technology. And it's not only related to social networks, but as I was saying before, is related to voter registration, voter identification of polling station, global information system with satellite to identify the position of polling stations, transmission of result, name it. So in each and single step of the electoral cycle nowadays, new information technology has completely, dramatically changed the way we were organizing election 20 or 30 years ago. So therefore, this is something that we need to deal in our own daily life, and we underline indeed with many trainings that we are organizing and comparative experience we try to bring the opportunities, but especially the challenges and the threat to implement this technology or to introduce this technology too close near to the election date. We say all the time that you need at least, in the best scenario, 18 months before to think to introduce technology in your voter registration process in the electoral transmission of results, and therefore it is important to underline what are the threats, because one, you introduce technology very close to elections, you can have a fantastic increase of costs that will not bring what you actually thought this technology will bring, meaning more transparency, but will bring much more conflicts and potential violence, as we saw in many countries when it comes to the electoral transmission of results, and therefore we need to be rather skeptical when hearing the promises that perhaps some companies or donors are making about the magic that one or other technology will do to the transparency of electoral process. Skeptical, practical and operational approach when it comes to the introduction of technology and the use of this technology, especially making a lot of case studies, comparative experiences and mock of use of this technology, test pilot, to see if what you are looking for is exactly what is going to be implemented Otherwise, you are going toward a major disaster when it comes to the perception of an electron management battery.